A renewed effort is underway to build the old Desert Line Railway east of San Diego. They hope to make it a shipping line between the U.S. and Mexico. A new company has taken over the track with a 99-year lease from San Diego's Metropolitan Transit System. But questions about the company's owners have some wondering whether the Desert Line is a railroad to nowhere. KUSI's John Dupree is here with tonight's special report. John?
Alan, as you're about to see, the owners of Pacific Imperial Railroad have been fighting off lawsuits for years. Lawsuits accusing them, among other things, taking money from lenders and investors and failing to pay it back. Why then would a taxpayer-subsidized public transportation utility enter into a long-term lease agreement with their company? We took that very question to the man at the top of the MTS. The Desert Line, America's last intercontinental railway, built with the greatest of expectations. Calamities kept it from becoming the international shipping lane it was supposed to be. Today, a small piece of it takes tourists on a 6-mile ride to the U.S.-Mexico border and back to Campo, while the latest in a long line of would-be tycoons makes yet another bid to rebuild it. Pacific Imperial Railroad controls this coveted 70-mile stretch of track, thanks to this, a 99-year lease granted by San Diego's Metropolitan Transit System.
We had to have a business plan prepared within a certain time frame, a reconstruction plan, a marketing plan, a business plan.
San Diego securities attorney Donald Steckline is the new CEO of Pacific Imperial. He negotiated the lease with MTS, and he says it wasn't easy. PIR, he says, had to prove to the public utility it was ready to build a railroad.
There were some very clear milestones that were set forth in that lease. Milestones such as, aside from payments, now payments, it pays $500,000 every 6 months to MTS. So $1 million a year minimum payments.
Are you up to date on those?
Yes, absolutely. And there will then be, on once it's operational, then the lease kicks in on a percentage of revenue.
And quarterly business statements. So much for pushing paperwork. But what about the railroad?
Our job is to complete our transaction with Mexico at a site called Lindero, where we'll interchange with Baja Rail. I've met with Hyundai, Toyota, Samsung, Bose, Mattel, and the amount of product and containers they need to move across that border. Toyota gave us a letter and said, can you move 200 containers a day for us? Samsung, 240 containers. Hyundai, 500 TEUs, 20-foot equivalent units. There is more product for this rail to move than it'll ever be able to move.
About an hour-and-a-half drive east of San Diego on an unused stretch of track that is the eastern end of the old Desert Line, we found the only tangible evidence that Pacific Imperial has done anything at all to build a railroad. The owners of Pacific Imperial Railroad took $450,000 of investors' money and bought these 3 locomotives from Idaho Northern and Pacific Railroad and had them towed here to this location where they've sat ever since. The only problem with them is they don't work. Pacific Imperial's former president, veteran railroad man David Rohall, says he thinks PIR owners never intended to operate the engines.
They intended to attract investors like me, which they did. And I think they intended for the company to fail.
And that is only one of several scathing accusations Rohall and the company's former CEO, Ernie Dahlman, have leveled against Pacific Imperial's owners. Those accusations include mismanagement, misconduct, and misappropriation of millions of dollars. Indeed, KUSI has discovered scores of lawsuits against Pacific Imperial's owners dating back more than a decade. Lawsuits in San Diego District Court and beyond accuse Charles Chaz McAfee and Dwight W. Jory, a pair of Las Vegas land and stock speculators, of borrowing millions of dollars for various real estate and other business projects unrelated to the railroad, projects they never completed. Despite all that, McAfee and Jory got the keys to the kingdom, the lease to the Desert Line. KUSI went to the man who runs MTS, the landlord of the Desert Line, to ask him why. Paul Yablonsky refused our efforts to get him to speak on camera, but he did agree to speak with us on the record. What does he make of the owners of Pacific Imperial? Yablonsky told us he sees McAfee as a man with a grand vision for the railway, someone willing and able to wrest control of it from the prior group, the Carrizo Gorge Railway. Yablonsky went on to say leasing the line to McAfee and Jory was, quote, our best option. He explained it like this. Rather than stay embroiled in the back and forth of the prior company, he said, we cleaned up the contract to have clear milestones of performance.
Ultimately, you want to be able to move 400 cars a day.
Yablonsky's confidence in that promise seems firm. He says Pacific Imperial has kept its promise to pay its first $1 million annual lease installment, and it has met its milestones. As to the stories of misuse of funds, Yablonsky says, quote, we have no knowledge of an improper use of funds or any violation of law by PIR. Indeed, MTS just ruled to reject Rohall and Dahlman's request for a partnership to run a railroad on the Desert Line, stating, quote, MTS will not negotiate new leases with anyone while its contract with Pacific Imperial Railroad is in force.
Folks, this story is developing as we speak. KUSI News has just learned Pacific Imperial Railroad is now announcing it has entered into an agreement with a Los Angeles firm called Diamond Capital Advisors to raise up to $150 million to repair bridges and tunnels and, they say, replace track and ties on those 70 miles of railroad track between the U.S.-Mexico border and connecting with Union Pacific Railroad in El Centro, California. Under scrutiny, it appears, PIR is acting quickly to raise the funds they need to keep the contract with MTS. Its detractors so far have lost on all fronts, and MTS sits back, collects its $1 million per year, and watches to see whether this railroad to nowhere ever turns into the vision its builder, San Diego industrialist John Spreckles, had so many years ago. John Dupree, KUSI News.